We are now entering our final session of the day, which is the Quantrix Expert Q&A session. And for this, I will welcome back Ben Wake, who will be helping to answer some of our questions. And we promoted this earlier, leading up to this event, and we had the option for you to ask questions on social media. You could also ask them on our registration page. So we have some questions already queued up. So let me just start right off the bat and with this one. How do you dynamically transition or move between different time periods in a model?
I will be posting a solution to this on the forums soon. I will describe it, but I won't show it because watching somebody write code is no fun. The concept, though, is an interesting one. If we have a timeline, for instance, doesn't have to be a timeline, just time categories, but a timeline is an easy way to get some time categories, and we put it up in the filter tray. It's often the case that we wish to sort of navigate forward and backward through time. So, oh, I'm in January, I want to go to February, I want to go to March. And the thing is, especially when we get to December, it can be a little awkward to go, oh, 2023, January. Oh, no, I want to look back at December of 2022. It's not the end of the world. It's certainly totally doable. But it annoyed me enough that I wrote a pair of scripts. And again, I'm not going to show off these scripts right now, but I will post them later. And what those scripts do is detect, hey, I have a category in the current view, and that category is called month. And I have a selection in the filter tray along that month. And so I am going to move forward for the forward script, or I'm going to move backward for the backward script. And the thing that is particularly nice in these scripts is if it detects a month and it detects a year and it can't go backwards, it will do both of them for you. And then I tie them to the hotkeys. If you've written scripts before, you know that we have hotkeys available. Well, the thing that I found is that 8 and 9 make really memorable hotkeys for me. If you glance down at your keyboard, they have a left parenthesis and a right parenthesis over them. So when I hit Control left parenthesis, what it does is walk me backwards 1 month through my time. If I hit Control right parenthesis, 0, it'll walk me forward 1. This works. The advantage to tying it to the specific view you're in is that it can work for a matrix, it can work for a view, it can work for a chart, and it can even work in a canvas. You can set it up with a little bit of extra work so that it can navigate across other levels of time as well. If you have, years, months, and days, you can walk forward 1 day, backward 1 day, and have that skip months if needed, have it skip years if needed. And or you can say, I have just years here. I will walk only through years. Or I have years and months, but the months aren't on the filter tray. I'm looking at a big aggregated view, so I'm going to use it to walk there. So I've personally found this to be very useful, and I tend to pull it into all of my models. For people who aren't already familiar with scripting, there are ways to bring in imports. I don't happen to have this one exported. I should have done, would have if I was a little more on the ball. But you can bring in an exported script into your model, and then the script is available. So I will publish as an export that you can download and quickly pull into all of your models those pair of methods, which you can then assign to those hotkeys and use to traverse time. That's what I have to say about that. I was going to speak to Ernesto's question. I know it's a hangover from the previous session, but I believe, Ernesto, you are asking about the filter tray and the desire to select multiple items in the filter tray. Well, the answer is No, but also yes. We have done this. We have precisely done this. That's what the item filter is. If I want to select E2 and E4, then what I'm going to do is pop open the item filter, unselect all E's, and select E2 and E4. And now I've shown it. The reason that I didn't design this such that it happened up here is because we still need a place to put E2 and E4. We need to label E2 and E4. We can put them on the row. We could put them on the column. If you have multiple categories, you could put them any place on the column. And what I eventually realized was, as I was working on designing this feature, that the thing that I really wanted was the ability to quickly select which items I'm showing. And yeah, I want to be able to select multiple. One other thing that Brad didn't emphasize, which is one of my favorite features of this particular thing, is similarly, I wanted to be able to select groups or not select groups. If I select and then deselect everything and then select this group, I've now shown everything in that group with very few clicks. So I am really excited to get this feature out to everybody. I hope that it is useful and that I get a bunch of good feedback on how to improve it, how to make it mesh with other people's use cases. But that is exactly what I was thinking of as we were designing and implementing and refining this feature. And boy, was there a lot of refining in this particular feature. Let me see. I'm just glancing back through the chat to see whether I missed any questions that were asked recently before I throw it out to the existing list. Thank you, Franz. I hope that works well for people. I know I have a complicated question, an esoteric question to answer for Rich, but I wanted to see whether there were other more straightforward questions first. Gilbert, that seems like a question maybe for the chat rather than for me. The scripting interface was designed for power users to do simple things. And it has transpired that it is mostly used either for power users or not power users to do such simple things that we really wanted to sort of consolidate them, make them even easier. Things like update all my data imports or navigate between canvases, or real power users such as yourself, Gilbert, who use them to do really quite complicated things. And you're really pushing the boundaries of what scripting can do and what scripting should do in ways that I like. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a really good excuse for us to put at least a little bit of attention to making some of the more common features, more common use cases of scripting, make them easier, make them more powerful, and also to figure out where scripting doesn't do certain things. One example of something that scripting doesn't currently do in 22.1, but begins to do, I won't say does, but begins to do in 22.2, is we've added support for some sort of rudimentary interactions with canvas objects, which previously was not available at all. So I'm just going to give one simple example and show off a little bit of syntax. But here I have a text box on the canvas, and previously there was no way in a script to access that. Well, now if I go to Canvas 1 and I offer a selection, it will now offer up that there's a text box called rectangle 1 on the canvas. And if I select it, then I can, for instance, change its text. And if I run this script, this is called action 2, it changes the text. This is a simple example, but it can be used for various more powerful things. One of the things that I personally found frustrating was that we had all this powerful API for interacting with matrices that didn't work if it was a matrix view on a canvas. And now I have matrix 1 on the canvas. I can refer to it either by the view name or as a shortcut, as a simplification. If I only have one copy of it, I can just grab it by calling it the matrix name. And what's more, I can rip down into a selection into it, just like any other matrix selection anywhere. And I can say, for instance, that the background color is green. Pretty sure that's green. Not sure why that didn't work. Maybe it's because I don't want that. Oh well. That's what happens when you go off script. There are ways to do this, and it does work, and I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. It's probably just the syntax error, and that's why I try not to write too much code in front of other people. I did want to show off one particular new, I won't call it a feature, I will say a simplification in scripting. I have seen many customer models that did not fully understand the interaction between scripts and calculation. And that makes sense to me. The interaction between scripts and calculation can be very confusing. And so a thing that I did, and this is 422.2, is I tried to make it easier. First of all, the most important thing to know about scripts and calculation is a lot of the time you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to do anything to make scripts calculate your model just like anything else does. When a script is run, calculation is paused, and as soon as the script is finished, Quantrix knows if you changed any values, or if you changed any formulas, or if you did anything like that, and will automatically trigger a calculation if auto calculation is on. So I've seen many scripts that run more slowly than they need to because they do a calculation inside the script rather than simply executing the script and allowing calculation to happen afterwards. Now, that said, there is a really good reason that you would need to run a calculation during a script, and that is if you want to gain access to those calculated values. I don't necessarily recommend this, but as a simple example, if you have a calculated matrix and then you're importing it into another matrix, you might do the calculation, and then once that calculation is complete, then you might want to do the import, update the import in order to pull in those freshly calculated values. And in the past, we've had several different calculate functions available to us, and I have basically replaced them all with one, calculate now, which says, I know calculation is paused for this script, but I need these values. Go perform a calculation, calculate anything that needs to be done. Slight esoteric thing, it will pull in any values from intermodal formulas. And the method won't finish until it's done. And one of the motivations of this is I've seen customer scripts that say, ensure calculated, recalculate all, right next to each other, not realizing that they do basically the same thing. So it performs two calculations, which can be quite slow for a big model. So my upshot here is calculate now will hopefully do what you need, and don't use it unless you need it, unless you need those values during the calculation. And if you are a power user, such as Gilbert, who genuinely needs the subtle differences between the existing methods, they're still there. I just hit them. They still work. They still work the same way they always have. Your scripts won't break or anything. I'm just trying to make things easier for new script writers. We'll calculate now, regenerate dynamic item categories. I don't want to promise that, but I believe it does. Yes. I believe it will trigger a calculation, wait for that calculation to complete, wait for any category items to generate, and if necessary, repeat that loop as long as necessary until they stop. If I'm wrong, I will rectify this problem in a future release. Brendan, did you have other questions from the existing list that you wanted to throw at me? I'm not seeing a lot in the chat right now.
Yes. So it looks like you covered, how does calculation work with scripting? An additional one we had was, if you want to create a smart button, but would then want to change it up, can you do that?
Excellent question. All right. So the answer is no, but yes. Again, and forgive me for my hedging answers. The way smart buttons are implemented is, for the most part, entirely using scripts. Their enablement condition is a script. Their body is a script. Where we needed new scripting methods, we created them. And I can show sort of what some of those things might look like. For instance, we added new, what's it called? We added a new next presentation and previous presentation methods to presentation. So presentation is whatever canvas you happen to be currently on, whichever one is currently selected. And so to implement the previous button, for instance, you would say previous presentation dot, what is this method actually called? Thank heavens for autocomplete, bring to front. In order to get the fancy enablement disablement, you just say presentation is not null and presentation dot previous presentation is not null. So as an example, this is what the previous smart button is actually doing under the hood. We are literally writing that script and running that script and using this. The actual code might look slightly differently, but these are the kinds of things we're doing. And so all of that functionality is available. And if you want to write a button that brings it to front and then, changes the text of a thing, you can write your own button. What we don't offer is the ability to change a smart button into a custom button or to add custom code to a smart button. The idea was that you would either use the smart button or write your own scripted button. There is one subtle caveat that I will mention, and that is And this may be a future feature that we want to bring into custom scripted buttons, or we may want to explore other powerful things. With that, Gilbert, I'll get to that question in a second, although unfortunately the answer is no at the moment. The one caveat here is that this use canvas name as label. So suppose I have a canvas that I drop here, and I'm just going to clean up a little bit here. So I've got two canvases, and in this one, I want to add a button that navigates to this canvas. So open canvas, which one? Canvas 2. Its label is canvas 2 because I chose that as the default option. What's more, its label is still whatever this name is, as I call it my canvas. And that name automatically updates to track this canvas. And again, that's a selection. You can choose any other name you want. You don't have to use this, but that functionality is not available with scripts. It's only available for this button, and it behaves much the same way as the script name tracking. Gilbert, the idea behind the smart buttons was that we wanted to introduce what felt to us to be a better navigation system. Several of the users that we observed writing these sort of model-driven apps were going to a lot of trouble making perspectives solely so that they could have a perspective that only had a canvas open in it each time. And so it seemed to us that the sort of obvious first step, the thing that we thought we wanted to do, would be to create one perspective for a user that was the opening canvas page and nothing else, and have the buttons simply bring up the canvas, and that way you don't have to write any new perspectives. That being said, if the feedback we get from these buttons is, well, these are cool, but I'd really like to be able to open up perspectives. I'd like to be able to, click a button and it brings up a chart in this corner and this and that corner and what have you. We can do that. And certainly you can still use scripting to open those perspectives. It's a very easy script to manage that. We are not done with smart buttons. Obviously I can't promise anything in particular. Even more than Brad can't. I can't. But I have ambitions to add more navigation, to add more capabilities, to add more types of smart buttons. And so if there are particular smart buttons that people want badly in their applications, they should make sure to let us know. You can put it in the chat. You can, send Brad all of the exciting emails, etc. But be sure and let us know how these new features are working for you, how they aren't working for you, what you wish they did, because we do listen to our customers and we do want to make your experiences better and more powerful. Rich, can I give a use case for the concat lists function? Why, I certainly can. I'm going to pop open a new model. And this is a sort of a small version, and it may feel a little bit contrived. I don't, when you say a use case, this is a variant of a real problem that I have really seen Quantrix customers have. And it works like this. They have multiple matrices with very similar looking structures. They aren't identical, but they are similar. In other words, they have, for instance, a shared category here but an unshared category here. And what they want to do is gather those up into one specific thing and work with it. So for instance, maybe these are keys. So I'm going to say rank between. And then I'm going to use my new fancy delete while clearing, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Whoops. Turns out you have to face your parentheses the right direction. Let's run that again to try and get some less overlapping numbers. Let's call that 1 and 5. Yep. Ernesto, it's a lot like replace the category by dragging. I didn't know I was missing it until Brad pointed it out and I implemented it and I use it all the time. So here we have our classic list of nouns. I'm not sweating yet. But so here we go. I have now set up my scenario. Trying to get the docking framework to behave. There we go. All right. So I've now set up my scenario, and now I want to write a selector that takes a key and gives me the value. So I'm trying to pull 1, 5, 9, right? So 1 is bookcase, 5 is noun, and 9 is crate. And I want to populate those values there. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to say that A2 equals select from, concatenate the lists, matrix 1, A2, and matrix 2, A2, right? So I'm grabbing this list and jamming them together, and that's my value list. Concat lists, matrix 1, A1, matrix 2, A1, and what am I trying to look up? Whatever's in A1. And now I've done it. Bookcase, noun, crate. So, Rich, did that answer your question? And I will just mention that this is a relatively simple example with only 2 matrices. If you had a dozen matrices, as long as you're willing to list them all off in each of these, you could do the same thing. So this is a variant of the real world use case that led me to add this function. I am reading this question here from Mark. Yeah, so Brian has already answered the question, although I believe the thorough answer is that it is not yet available. I will double check this live for you on the spot, but I don't think I made this accessible yet. Oh, I'm totally wrong. As of 22.2, in my infinite foresight, I did, in fact, make it so that you can say hidden equals true, for instance. And if I run this script, that is now hidden. Now, it's not obvious in layout mode that it's hidden, but your users will presumably be working with it in interact mode. And so, yeah, this is not available in 22.1, so your current version, but it will be available for you really soon. What do you mean, sorry for the question? That was a great question. I hope we answered it well. I know we have a somewhat esoteric question from Rich that I am happy to answer, but I don't want to go into too much detail. But let me show you a very silly model. So Rich's question is, in the past, a long time ago, in the bloom of my youth, I showed off at a conference a set of functions that exist in Quantrix, but we don't make visible to customers. We don't put it in the script, the function autocomplete. We don't put it in the function tool pane. And there's a good reason we don't. But it's still kind of interesting to know that they exist. So again, here I'm going to build this up with nonsense data. And then I'm going to attempt to show what the slice function does, despite the fact that after racking my brains for an entire day, I can no longer come up with a single real-world use case for it. I still think it is interesting to know a little bit more about how Quantrix does calculations with ranges. So I'm going to start with a really simple example, and I'm going to say that A2 equals A1 plus 3. So we've all seen this, and we've all sort of taken for granted that this works correctly. Why wouldn't it work? You know, it's not like it's Excel and you have to write a different formula for each one. But under the hood, Quantrix has to be pretty smart to figure out what you mean. When you say A1, and this is a simple matrix, this has, you know, only 2 categories. When you say A1, Quantrix needs to figure out whether you mean all the values in A1 or whether you mean each specific value of A1 in turn. And in this case, we clearly mean each specific value of A1 in turn, right? We want 3 more than the corresponding value, 3 more than the corresponding value, etc. We call this, in our parlance, slicing. Now, there are times when you don't want that. You might want to say, for instance, the sum of all of the A1s. And here, Quantrix is going to say, I do not know what you mean. I assume that you want slicing. So it says, this value is the sum of all one of these values. This is the sum of all one of these values. This is the sum of all one of these values. Now, the way around this is to tell it, hey, I want all of these. I want every value along B, not just the slice value. And then it takes these and adds them up for each of these. This says, I want all of these. I want all of these. I want all of these. Now, again, hilariously contrived example. It's just to illustrate what slice does. There's no reason you would ever want to do this. But you can undo all your good work by using the slice function. So this says, give me a list, and slice says, hint to the calculation engine that despite the fact that this function claims it wants a list, and I have a list available, actually slice it. Now, there used to be a really good reason to have slice, and that was for certain esoteric use cases involving expressions, especially expressions for conditional formats. But Quantrix has gotten smart since we introduced it, and conditional expressions hopefully just work better. it's nice to know that you have in your toolkit, if you're doing something really complicated and you're getting a list, but you wish you were getting a specific value, that you can try wrapping slice around it. But in practice, if you really, really need it, you're probably doing something so weird that it won't even work and you need to do something else. I will just briefly mention that there is an opposite of slice as well, force list. And force list is just the opposite. It says, hey, hint to the calculation engine. You may not be able to find one. You may not understand that this is the thing that you need. But if you can find a list and you know how to get one, don't slice across this. Give me the whole list instead. And it might seem like you could do this, force list A1, but it won't actually work because, again, it's just a hint to the calculation engine. And that's one of the reasons why we don't publish it. It's really a very subtle, minor, simple interaction. I am glancing at some of these questions. So, Gilbert, what I would say in terms of that question is that you have perhaps such an esoteric use case that what I might suggest is to keep the formula somewhere else and copy over the results of that calculation each time you start your calculation via scripts. I understand what you're trying to do, but you are, I won't say but, I understand what you're trying to do, and the answer is no, Quantrix doesn't have that built in. There are ways we can potentially get around it. Ernesto, you make an excellent point. I just want to make sure that anybody who's not already aware of this functionality, this has been around for a while and improved in the previous version. You can ignore or not ignore a formula by what I'm doing is hitting Control/, which all it does is put 2 slashes in front of the formula to say this is a comment. Let me see. So Franz, you cannot use the precise formula with keep values via scripts because it's not exposed in scripts. If that's something that would be valuable to you, that is great feedback. Right now, it was intended as a use case for people driving the UX manually. There's no reason it couldn't be added to scripts. It's just always a little bit of extra work to add something to scripts. Tahir, you said it would be even better if a script puts matrix on a canvas rather than hiding it. So one canvas just loads various matrices. So that's functionality that isn't yet available. And one of the, how do I want to say this? It is potentially possible, but it also might be something that is more trouble to do in that way than some other potentially fancier way to achieve the same results. So I am I'm way out in left field here. This is not something we are promising to do. It's not necessarily something that we're considering very seriously, but by all means, let us know if it's exciting to you. One of the things I've thought about is to have a canvas with a sort of a slideshow chunk of it, like a sub canvas the ability to put something on there that you can cycle through. One of the tensions that we really struggled with when it came to how to design apps and design navigation was, where does the navigation live? Is the navigation on the canvas, or is the navigation outside the canvas? And what we have, at least for the moment, settled on is the navigation's inside the canvas and it walks between canvases, and so canvases have shared buttons. But hypothetically, I could imagine a world where the canvas, or maybe Brad's vision of a canvas-like existence that isn't precisely a canvas, but has, you know, views or tiles or what have you in it, has a section that could be swapped out. Yes, Aaron. Yo dog, I heard you liked canvases. That could be a powerful tool. It could also end up being, in weird ways, more trouble than it's worth. But I could imagine a world where you could drive something like, I have a canvas object and I'm swapping contents in via scripts. It's not currently possible, but I can imagine it. One thing that this occurs to me to mention, that I don't know how many people have worked with canvases, building these apps and canvas buttons and the like. But I just wanted to mention really quickly that suppose I have gone to a lot of trouble to build some navigation. You may or may not recognize a scenario, and then I line it all up and distribute it evenly, get it where I want it. Put it up here, and then I want to copy it onto another canvas. You might recognize that previously this wouldn't end up where you wanted it, but now it does. And indeed, if you, again, this is in 22.2, it will now tile these out if and only if the place where you're trying to dump them is already occupied. It's a minor quality of life improvement, but hopefully it will make a difference to people who build these apps. Let me see. Yeah, running models should not require you to change any formulas while in use. That seems like a pretty reasonable rule to live by there, Rich. It seems like we are at least nearing the end of the questions. Brendan, was there anything else pre-registered on the list?
No, you covered everything that we were going to talk about.
Okay, I thought I might throw one other quick thing, more or less just Rich's way, although anybody is welcome to listen. Rich, you also mentioned internal permute. I never use internal permute. It does a really sort of straightforward but limited thing. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, internal permute, like slice and force list, is another one of these hidden functions that we don't expose. It's doing the right thing, but I'm not. So all internal permute does is say, for each of these lists, take the first item, 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 the second, first, third, first, second, first, etc. All the combinations of them, and slap colons in between them, turn them into text. And the reason that exists is a glimpse into the seamy underbelly of Quantrix. We use that when we are converting your using as's into selects under the hood. And so the only reason I could imagine using this would be if you want to do something a lot like using as, but using as isn't quite getting you exactly what you want. And so you want to basically try and out Quantrix, which, can be entirely possible. It's Quantrix is always doing its best to guess what you want. And a lot of the time it does a great job, but sometimes you know a little better than it does. I will mention that a thing that I do actually use more often, although, again, it's fairly specific, is internal concatenate. And internal concatenate is the other end of this same exact process. Rather than build up an actual use case, I'll just show it in practice. Internal concatenate is a lot like internal permute, except it ties these two things together item by item. Or in this case, actually, let's slap in another one. So first, second, third. And again, it slaps colons in between. And the reason we do that is because you may be doing a select where you're trying to look up multiple keys at once. And so typically, rather than being list of values that I'm handing, this would be at category. This would be at another category. This would be at another category. And so what you'd be building up is an item lookup key that you're going to then go against either an internal permute or some other descriptor, not descriptor, sorry, meta function that describes that key. Yes, Lindsay, absolutely. If you are so unfortunate as to have to use at level is another case where this would come in. And internal concatenate is really pretty. It's almost just icing sugar. It's it really just does effectively the same thing as this, although it will be more careful about things like it will be more careful about things like if your names require quoting and stuff like that. But really, I just think it's maybe easier to read. In general, if I can use the using as, I do, because Quantrix is pretty good at writing selects for you. And hopefully we'll continue to push the boundaries of how to perform intelligent lookups. And that's a thing that is churning in the back of my head is how to make looking things up in Quantrix faster, easier, more intuitive, more dynamic, etc. We didn't really have a you bet, Rich. We didn't really have a target time for this. Feels like we've covered an awful lot of ground, and I really appreciate the interesting questions and everybody's time. And thank you all so much for listening to me and asking me things and giving me a chance to talk about the product that I love so very much. I love writing it, I love using it, and I love talking to customers about how they're using it and how I can keep making it better for them. Thank you.